From the bell, which enabled me to deduce that Mr. Jabez Wilson was headed here to meet a most distasteful and untimely demise.
Hello, welcome to my amazing facts, totally amazing facts for Star Trek Next Generation, Series 2, Episode 3, Elementary Dear Data. The Enterprise is rendezvousing with the USS Victory, and while they await, Geordi and Data decide to take part in a holodeck recreation of a Sherlock Holmes mystery, like a couple of space detectives. In English, this episode is called Elementary My Dear Data, but in other languages it has surprising translations. In Portugal, the episode is titled O Fecho Sanguine, the Sanguine Clasp, which perhaps references the eye-catching brooch that Dr. Pulaski wears. In Iceland, the episode is called Faranlegi ein Kasperagenin, which translates as the Ridiculous Detective. In Slovakia, it's titled Pokta Karodejingenrenis, which translates as the Hag's Tribute. And most disturbingly, in Peru, it's titled as the Spanish El Martillo que rompe la cara, which translates as the face-smashing hammer. In Victorian London, the common stovepipe hat, worn by just about any decent man, was a symbol of a man's dignity and maturity. The height of it would symbolize a man's stature in ancient Britain. Initially, it was designed that Moriarty would have a metre-tall hat to show his prowess over Victorian London, but the actor found it unsteady to walk with, and it would knock into doorways, bump into bridges, etc. A newly designed hat, more in keeping with the height of a doctor's hat, was created as a last-minute replacement.
You're wasting your breath, Lieutenant. Saying that to Data is asking a computer not to compute.
If this episode highlights anything to Star Trek's fans, it's that Riker had foregone an important change. If you look at the character in Season 1, you'd notice that he's chin-bald, but here in Series 2, he has a beard. That's because after filming Season 1, he went camping with his cousin, Michael Dorn. They drank under a pale moonlight and fell asleep under the stars. While asleep, a snail had made its journey onto Jonathan Frakes' face. Minutes later, he awoke in acute pain and was rushed to hospital. It was discovered that he'd suffered an allergic reaction to mollusks, which is easily treatable with a special balm, but he had a long red mark on his chin where the snail had been, a mark that the doctor said would take up to a year to fade away. Upon speaking to Rick Berman, they decided together that the only way to proceed for Series 2 was for him to grow a big boy beard to cover it up. This episode is the first showing of the unrivaled friendship between Geordi and Data. The writers had surmised that Data, being a robotic creature, would be attracted to Geordi LaForge's robotic eye-frame. This friendship would easily overshadow Lieutenant Paris and Harry Kim's friendship by a million space miles, but of course it would come second fiddle to the handsome friendship of Chief O'Brien and Dr. Bashir. After filming had wrapped on this classic episode, Patrick Stewart famously misremembered what had happened during the episode. Gene Roddenberry overheard Picard telling a wardrobe supervisor that he'd been playing the character of Sherlock Holmes in the episode. Gene supposedly pulled Patrick Stewart aside and told him that he was crazy. It was Data playing Sherlock Holmes, not Captain Picard.
He is crazy. Here is the way it really is.
No matter how Gene explained it, he was faced with a blank look of confusion. In the end, they agreed to disagree, but to this day, Patrick Stewart possibly still tells people that it was him who played Sherlock Holmes. It was during the production of Elementary Dear Data that the feud between Star Trek and its sci-fi rival of 1988 really picked up pace. In the first take of Data being in the holodeck, a scuffle was happening to the stage left as actors from Short Circuit 2 had made their way to the Star Trek Studio 9 set with nothing on their mind but causing trouble. They upended the catering table and even threw some of the episode's period costumes onto the custard and cakes that they tipped onto the floor. Worth actor Michael Dorn and his cousin had to restrain the Short Circuit 2 actors and forcefully eject them from the Paramount studios. Here is footage of the original first take. Listen carefully and you'll hear subtle manifestations of trouble. Star Trek official Daniel Davis plays the role of Moriarty, the evil nightmare from Sherlock Holmes. What people at the time didn't realise, though, was that he possibly was married to the previous Dr. Pulaski actress, Gates McSomething. Suspicions suggest that she coerced him to read for the role of Moriarty in a bid to spy on what was happening at the studio while she wasn't around. If she could get enough dirt on what was really going on there, she could threaten going to the papers to try and get her job back. But thankfully, rumours suggest that nothing negative happened at all while Daniel Davis was on set. He would later return in Series 6 as Moriarty, and again in Series 7 as Chief O'Brien's father, Seamus Gilligan O'Brien Bison. Did you notice upon close inspection that Whoopi Goldberg, Marina Sirtis, Will Wheaton and Alice Krieger are not in this episode? Now that's possibly because there was an outbreak of oral diphtheria that hit the studio hard, rendering several of the cast unable to talk without constantly salivating, dripping drool down themselves and onto the floor because of the way that oral diphtheria causes the salivary glands to overproduce to rid the body of toxins. Luckily, the actors had medical insurance paid for by Paramount, so they had the medical help and medicine that they needed for the duration of this episode. Thank goodness this was filmed in America and not in Canada or the UK. Those places don't even have widely rolled out medical insurance. A fear by the production crew was that they didn't have the rights to use the characters of Sherlock Holmes from the novels. Initially, they gained the rights to a little-known series called the Garum Sloge Mysteries of Old London Town, a series of books from the 1920s that had less than 100,000 sales. After the final script was written, writer Brian Allen Lane secured the rights for Sherlock Holmes and so rewrote the story the way he originally envisioned, as a Sherlock Holmes story and not as a Garum Sloge story. But eagle-eyed viewers would soon have picked up on one Garum character that did indeed make it into the filmed episode, as Sherlock didn't have an equivalent character. During Series 4 of Star Trek Next Generation, there's an episode called Future Imperfect, where Riker awakes to find himself 15 years in the future. He has a wife and a child, and an even snappier beard in this strange future. But it turns out to be an alien trick, of course, orchestrated by an alien called Barash, who was pretending to be his alien son. This episode wouldn't be aired for over 2 years after Elementary Dear Data. Thankfully, this episode in Series 4 that I've just been talking about has no links to Series 2 at all, and especially this episode, except for the fact, of course, that it's the same show. It's Star Trek Next Generation. There is barely any link at all between this episode and the amazing movie Sherlock Holmes in China, but just think what an exciting holodeck program that might have made. Felix himself could have made something really interesting and exciting with that subject matter. Perhaps he did, and Chief O'Brien just didn't tell anyone. Thanks very much for finding out all about the episode Elementary Dear Data. There's probably no better heap of facts about this episode than the heap that I just told you all about. So thanks very much. Please subscribe, unless you don't want to, or unless you already have. Thanks very much in that case. And I'll see you next time, hopefully for some very interesting facts. Good day to you all. Bye!
I said shut up, as in close your mouth and stop talking.